Welcome to the Interop. Today, my guest is Jehan Tremback. He's Cosmos Hub lead at Informal Systems. Informal is building verifiable systems and organizations, and they're also the steward for several technologies core to Cosmos, including Comet BFT, IBC Rust, and of course the Cosmos Hub. In today's conversation, we'll discuss Informal's role in stewarding the hub, what is Interchain Security, and the newest version of Interchain Security, partial set security. We'll discuss changes and sort of how the ICS vision is evolving. We'll talk about bringing Bitcoin security to the hub and how the hub can compete in the broader security landscape. I'm also dying to find out why he thinks the hub should become a security aggregator. So I've been away for a couple weeks traveling to East Denver, and so I apologize for not having an episode last week, but we'll try to get episodes out on a regular basis again. It's just so hard recording with all this traveling, but I'm glad that I was able to record this episode with Jehan on the day of the 5th anniversary of the hub. If you weren't in Denver, if you didn't come to our Convergence event, definitely check out the video from that panel. It'll be down in the show notes. It was a really interesting panel about how Ethereum and Cosmos are coming together, and I hope you'll check that out. So before we get started, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop. Remember, none of what we discuss here on the Interop is investment advice, and if you enjoy this content, please consider staking with us. We're live on Avmos, Quicksilver, and Osmosis. Just look for Interop in the active set. My guest, Jehan Tremback, is coming up next, right here on the Interop. Hey Jehan, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So there's lots to talk about today, particularly surrounding the hub, but it's actually interesting that we're recording this on the 5th anniversary of the hub. So happy hub anniversary, I guess, as I like to call it. What does this day mean to you? And reflecting back on 5 years, what has the hub achieved its vision? Have we achieved success?
Yeah, I mean, I've only really been involved for like maybe 2 or 3 years, I guess. So I wasn't around when the Cosmos Hub launched or Cosmos launched. But I think I did get involved pretty soon after IBC launched. So obviously, before IBC existed, that was a very, very different time because Cosmos was doing what it was supposed to do. I think that the hub has, the hub has, like, at this point, I think we've sort of started dialing in on a very cohesive use case for the Cosmos Hub, and I think in the past, throughout the evolution of Cosmos, that maybe had been missing, where Cosmos is kind of like this very useful technology. IBC, the Cosmos SDK, very useful way. Very good way to build chains, and then also have really good connectivity between chains out of the box. But there wasn't necessarily really a good sort of idea for how the hub fit in there. I think in the past, the hub a lot of times was, I'm talking maybe like 3 years ago, the Cosmos Hub was kind of a test net for Cosmos SDK. So there'd be new features in the SDK would get launched on the hub, and but it wasn't necessarily really interacting with other chains. And so now we have a much clearer mission for how the hub fits into this ecosystem. This really successful ecosystem that the Cosmos Hub has created. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the hub showcased the Cosmos SDK and everything that was possible with it, and then when IBC came online, it also sort of showcased like the power of IBC, and Osmosis would play a big role there as well. But it's been like, I think, the flagship product of the Cosmos SDK as far as I see it, and demonstrated what's possible there. Of course, like a lot of things are changing now, and like the Cosmos SDK, I think, the vision for the Cosmos SDK is shifting. It's obviously like very important to the modular vision and being able to deploy applications. And that's what we're going to talk about here, using renting security from other sources. In terms of where the hub and particularly the Cosmos SDK started, right, as this framework for building application-specific blockchains where there was an implication of owning your own security, and now the Cosmos SDK, I think, moving more towards this idea of being able to rent security, building an application, right, like with the best framework possible, but being able to rent security from somewhere else. Does this shift signify like a shift also in the vision for the Cosmos SDK, or was this always kind of the end game in your view?
Well, let me just be clear. The Cosmos SDK is the framework that's used to build Cosmos blockchains, and
of course,
that's different from the Cosmos Hub, just for your listeners. But the Cosmos SDK, I know I can't speak too much to it's a separate team, but they are doing a lot of stuff to basically make it ZK provable, to make it suitable for rollups, and that's really exciting. But even without that, the Cosmos SDK is a toolkit to let you build your own app chain, and that's always what kind of Cosmos has been about. In the past, and I think also going into the future. And with app chains, app chains are kind of the most flexible and most powerful way to build a blockchain project, because you can control every aspect of its operation, and you can have, like, for example, you can have stuff that runs off to the side of the Skip has a Slinky Oracle framework that runs off to the side. There's stuff like DYDX built the Cosmos chain, and they a big reason why they did that was to have this off-chain order book system, and you can kind of customize every single thing. So I think that's always going to be always going to be a big factor. So, like, let's say Celestia, for example, you can build a rollup on Celestia. You can't build Celestia on Celestia. You can build Celestia on the Cosmos SDK, which is what they did. So it gives you the power you need to really do kind of L1s.
I like the way Ethan put it in a podcast I heard recently. He was talking about how, like, the Cosmos SDK is built is made to build frontier chains and frontier applications, and a lot of the sort of chains that are at the frontier are using the Cosmos SDK. So like DYDX, Celestia, Injective, Say, Barachain, and the list goes on. Yeah,
I mean, there are a lot of projects where a smart contract is the best way to do it. I mean, if you're doing, let's say, it's a DEX or something, or it's something that's not too it doesn't require a huge amount of control over how it executes, or tweaking of the performance or block speed. And smart contracts make a lot of sense, and rollups as well. Rollups are a little bit kind of like between a smart contract and a chain. But if you really want the maximum power, you got to reach for an app chain. And the best way to build those is with the Cosmos SDK.
Cool. So I just want to focus on you a little bit. So you're the Cosmos Hub lead at Informal Systems. What does the Cosmos Hub lead do? For people out there, wondering, sort of discovering that there's a person who's leading the hub.
I lead in the hub at Informal, and actually, technically, I'm product owner, so I don't actually lead the development team. That's my colleague Marius Poke who does that. But basically, as people know, the Cosmos Hub is very decentralized, so it's not like there's. I certainly have like influence in the community, but there's no official like leadership. But what I do day to day is kind of our focus at Informal is Interchain Security. Has been in the past. We're also now moving into doing more liquidity and interchain capital related things. So Atom Wars, which I can speak about as well. But basically, I sort of think about what we want to do with the products, where we want to take them, and what we want like the experience for someone using them to be like. And then also, I come from a technical background as a developer, so my focus is kind of technical, and I'll also spend time kind of specking them out, working with developers to figure out how exactly it's going to work. Publishing specs and ADRs, and sometimes even writing some code. So I've been writing code for Atom Wars, running Cosmos contract for that. So yeah, it's and a lot of meetings kind of get everyone on the same page. But yeah,
it's a peculiar position to be in, because like you're a product owner for a product that like you don't actually own in the actual sense. The governance owns the product.
For a product that nobody owns. Yeah,
exactly. And so
yeah,
I'm curious, like, a product owner, I think typically takes feedback from customers, and then integrates those feedback into product features or improvements to the product, and then pushes those features out to the product, and it's sort of like this feedback loop. Now it's sort of similar with the hub, right? Like you have the community, you have users, you have developers. Now there are different, say, like customers, right? There are different people that are using the hub or interested in the hub's success, and then your role is to sort of transform those into ADRs and governance proposals that then make it into code and are getting deployed. On the face of it, it seems like a very sort of similar circular process, but like, where do the hiccups come? I imagine there's more hiccups and more sort of barriers in the decentralized sort of paradigm in which you operate.
I mean, I think it's interesting. Yeah, there's users of the hub, and then there's also there's also stakeholders. So obviously, and anyone who has atoms is a stakeholder, really. And then also people who participate in governance are stakeholders. One of the challenges is we want to be very open to feedback from the community, and the main venue for that is to try to centralize it. We use the Cosmos Hub forum, and so we publish stuff. We have a process called the CHIPS process, so we publish stuff and try to get feedback on it there. And we get valuable feedback, which we take very seriously. But a lot of times it's hard for community members to have the time to sort of read deeply into how something works and provide like a lot of feedback. So what we do can't just be only based on community feedback, because in general, if you say, hey, here's these 10 options for how to design this, which one do you guys like? I mean, it's not really their job. So a lot of what we do is kind of try to come up with maybe 2 directions and put those out there and see what the response to them is, to distill it and make it simpler. And I mean, I hold tokens of protocols that I have very little involvement or knowledge of, like let's say Graph protocol or something. I think it's a cool protocol, but I'm not like, just being some kind of small token holder. It's not even in the Cosmos ecosystem. And I'm not like necessarily influencing every decision, right? And I think it's the same thing with Atom Holds. There is also a lot of people who are very deeply involved and have a lot of opinions, so we try to take this seriously. But yeah, a lot of also it is going to the customers. That does tend to be clear. So going to existing consumer chains, so Stride and Neutron, and then also a project we're talking to join and getting their opinions on how they want things to work. That tends to be more focused.
So you guys also have this business development role that, maybe this is a good segue also into the role of the ICF. Like, I think historically the ICF had a bigger role in kind of doing this product ownership for the hub. Now that's shifting outwards into organizations in the ecosystem. Does the business development aspect also fall under the responsibility of Informal Systems, and how is that being accelerated? Because I think a lot of people in the space have been a little bit disheartened by the lack of business development, the lack of funding to projects, like the lack of just having sort of like an entry point, right? Or like a desk where people coming to the ecosystem can say, hey, like, I want to build a Cosmos chain, how should I do that? And I think a lot of folks were expecting or thought the ICF was doing this, but wasn't. So yeah, so that's a lot of context, but how is Informal, sort of advancing business development in this front?
Our mandated role at Informal, based on our funding proposal from last year, doesn't include a huge amount of funding for business development. And that proposal is mostly for software development, and that's kind of where the headcount is going to. But we also realized early this year that was probably a major place we need more activity is business development. And so we're reprioritizing. We're now actually hiring for an ecosystem growth lead, and we already do. Myself and then also other members of our team already do a lot of business development. We do have, in terms of the official funding right now in that proposal, it's basically half a full-time employee for business development. So that covers Thyborg's activities. He's someone a lot of people know. Does BD at Informal, but then myself and other members of our team also do a lot of BD just on onboarding projects and telling them about it and stuff. So the AA DAO also is ramping up BD efforts around Interchain Security, and they I think it was I don't want to misquote them, but they're putting like 25% of their funding, I think, towards that, towards business development around ICS and granting consumer chains, and they're also doing a venture grants program, which is kind of an ecosystem investment program, and that will also, I think, a lot of that will go towards consumer chains at all. So we're as well. So I think we're definitely ramping it up, and we've definitely noticed that this is a major need. And so then there's kind of two angles to that. So first of all, there's like the question of like who's doing BD for Cosmos, building a Cosmos chain, and then there's a question of who's doing BD for the Cosmos Hub. And so for us, and also AADAO, we want that to be kind of unified. So basically, we want to go out, we want to talk to projects that are new to Cosmos and say, hey, here's this great technology you can build this great stuff with, and the best place to launch this type of chain is the Cosmos Hub, and kind of have that be like a unified effort. And I think and a lot of times, like if you are doing, if someone's doing a startup, the kind of, which is kind of our target customers, as people who want to launch chains, time is at a premium. And so being able to educate somebody and then bring them in to use the technology to launch in a default place, it saves them a lot of time, and it gets them in. And then once they're in, they're sticky because they don't really have a reason, to want to leave. And so we hope that strategy is going to be good for kind of accelerating a lot of early stage projects to get them onto ICS. And it's not a new thing. I think every blockchain platform, since like Ethereum, let's say, has kind of put this playbook into action. And that's something that we're trying to do more and more, along with AADAO. And so on the ICF's role, the ICF is, this goes back into some ancient, Cosmos history, Cosmos drama history, but the ICF is a nonprofit, that kind of, did a lot of the original stuff, with the ICO and stuff back in like 2017, or I think they called it a fundraiser. And they kind of, so that's a nonprofit, and their mission has always been, though, to sort of develop the Cosmos stack. So the open source Cosmos SDK, IBC Go, and that stuff's all very valuable to us. But they have never necessarily, they had the responsibility for the hub for several years. In 2019, there was like, some drama, and the company that was kind of maintaining the hub is not anymore for various reasons we don't have to get into. And it's kind of landed on the ICF. And the ICF did a very good job of keeping it going and everything, but they're never really oriented towards sort of a really, kind of hard driving like role to like promote this blockchain. And so that's something with like the AADAO and the community pool getting more cohesive and more sort of in passing proposals to fund teams like ours. That's something where the hub is now starting to do that, by itself in a decentralized way, which is pretty cool. But of course, the ICF's funding and efforts on Cosmos SDK and IBC are extremely important as a base layer to everything.
Yeah, and just maybe to clarify here that I don't want to spend too much time on this here, but that the Cosmos SDK and IBC are maintained by other teams. Or I guess you guys are doing IBC, the Rust version of IBC. Yeah,
that's right. Informal does. Yeah. Also, just to be clear, like Informal has a Cosmos Hub team, which is funded directly by the community pool, which is the team that I'm on. But also Informal does do a lot of work for the ICF as well. So I am not super involved in that work for the ICF, although I know all the people very well because they work at Informal, but it's not really my wheelhouse. So stuff like that, like IBCRS, I would still consider that to be under the umbrella of the ICF, although some of that work is done by teams at Informal.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, thanks for all that context. I think that's super helpful, and I think for people listening, it will help them really understand sort of the role of Informal and other teams in the space. And I'm actually really happy to hear that you guys are taking on more of a business development role and working with AADAO to centralize, I guess, the business development efforts. I think that's very much needed and something that other chains have done very well, including like Solana and Polygon and even Ethereum.
Absolutely.
But in the
Ethereum invented
Cosmos
it.
has been kind of lacking. Yeah. Cool. So let's move on to ICS, replicated security, partial security. Actually, I mean, this was sort of the main reason why I wanted to get you on here is to talk about partial set security. this idea of shared security on the hub has been around for a while. It was launched some time ago now. I think over a year and a half ago, maybe even 2 years ago. Time seems to escape me these days. But
Well, it's been
so
about
there's
a
all
year.
these.
It's been about a year that it's been live. But yeah.
Right. Okay. And so there's these three different terms, right? So there's interchain security, ICS, and then there's replicated security and partial set security. And I'm still confused as to what these things mean and how they relate to each other. So maybe just sort of clearing up the confusion here.
Yeah. So I do apologize for the confusion. I'm also like, I think it's, generally we should just call them all ICS, interchain security. And replicated security and partial set security are just two different variations of it. I would actually say partial set security is kind of like ICS v2. So we're going to be doing some marketing work to kind of clear up those terms. But in general, it's interchain security. That's the hub's restaking product. So the original version of it, which is in production now, which kind of went live about a year ago, is replicated security. And replicated security, every validator on the Cosmos hub runs every consumer chain. So if a consumer chain joins, every validator has to run it. It's actually not quite every validator. 5% of the smallest ones don't. But in effect, that is actually a large number of validators because there's many small ones. But effectively, it's like every validator has to run it. So that is the highest level of security. And there was actually an interesting. I'll get into this a little bit later, but there's something called the subset problem. There's a lot of thinking we've done around the security properties of these different variations. So I'd love to cover in more detail. But just to keep a high level for now, if the entire validator set's running it, you have the full security of the Cosmos hub. You have full economic alignment basically, and it is the highest level of security. However, along with that high level of security and the high level of power you get from an app chain, the expenses for validators are somewhat high as well. So validators running another chain, they kind of need to run another server. And you multiply that by 180, it's a lot of money. And so that's something where I think we didn't necessarily last year, we didn't do a good job anticipating how, and people were saying this, and I think we always knew there were going to be scaling limits to it. But basically, that's the major downside of replicated security is the scaling limits. So to get every validator to run a consumer chain, they all have to, or at least majority of them have to agree to it and pass the proposal. And so we have two very high profile, very high quality consumer chains running, Neutron and Stride. I'm very happy about that. But it has been kind of a high barrier entry to the new chains just starting out. And so that's a partial set security, which is really just the next version of interchain security is addressing. So with that, you don't have to have every validator run every chain. You can have a chain start basically permissionlessly, and as soon as validators start opting in, it starts running. And so with that, it allows chains to sort of start up in a very lightweight way, have the Cosmos Hub be a place to find a validator set, get started, get launched, and scale their security as they need to. And what that allows us to do is really ramp up, sort of open the floodgates to basically let everybody who wanted to run a consumer chain run a consumer chain. And that's also, our ramp up of the BD and growth efforts are, enabled by that, because then we can bring a lot of people in, get them started, get them going, and there's not this big hurdle of the governance proposal. So that's what that distinction is all about. There is a feature in partial set security that's called top N. So there will be an option for chains to have guaranteed security. So for Neutron and Stride, for example, they're going to move to that. And what that does is you can have a setting that says, for this consumer chain, we want to mandate that the top N% for Neutron and Stride, or the top 95% of validators have to continue running these chains. And that's good for chains that do need to continue with a high level of security. Or if we get other sort of higher profile chains coming in, they might also use that. So chains that can clear that governance hurdle may want to use that. For the majority of chains, though, I think it's going to be they can just launch permissionlessly, validators start opting in, and it's a lot smoother. So that's kind of the, that's to clear that up. It's all just interchain security, and partial set security makes it easier to launch.
So this top end thing you mentioned, so that would mandate that validators run, or at least the top 95% of validators run security for these chains. Is that a governance? Is that subject to governance?
Yes. Yeah, it has to be. Yeah. So, regular opt-in consumer chains, they can, that's where there's no top end, permissionless. They can launch permissionlessly. I think in the first version, there will be a governance proposal for every consumer chain. But that's kind of an implementation detail. But it will be soon. It will be completely permissionless. And but yeah, for top N, if you're mandating that a certain top percentage of validators run it, that there does need to be a governance proposal. So top 95% is kind of basically equivalent to replicated security, the old version. But you could also do something like top 66%. 66% of the validators actually is only 24 nodes. So that's pretty interesting because you get like the majority of the same security, but it is only 24 nodes that have to run it, reducing the costs by a lot. But yeah, I think it's going to be less important than opt-in security. It's more just there if you need it.
The vision here seems to be kind of different from the original vision of Interchain Security, at least how I remember it. I remember Interchain Security being this idea that the Cosmos Hub would secure a handful of chains, maybe 10, 20 chains. These would be very high quality projects like, the Neutrons, the Strides, the Nobles, aligned and complementary with amongst each other, no competing chains on the hub. And I kind of like that. I felt that this would create sort of an ecosystem of applications that would create a lot of value for the hub, and that this curation was really an important aspect of Interchain Security. It seems now that shifting to a more permissionless model where the hub becomes kind of a security marketplace and validators can opt in or opt out of securing certain chains. Yeah, why is there a shift or an apparent shift in vision? And how will this, is this marketplace sort of the right way to see Interchain Security moving forward?
Yes. Yeah. There has been a shift in vision, and you're right that you described the sort of strategy, from last year pretty well. And I think the reason we're shifting is because, I think that the overhead of governance ended up being, more than we expected, and the overhead of making every validator get on board. And I think that one of the points of friction that happened was that you'd have chains where, you'd let's say Neutron, for example. Neutron there's a little bit of a split between Atom token holders, I felt, and validators. So where for a token holder, if you have Neutron on board, that's very good, because Neutron is a leading smart contract platform in Cosmos, and that's having them on board is only good for an Atom token holder. It's like that's great to have them in. For validators, token holders don't really necessarily face any costs for every new consumer chain. For validators, they do, and so that was a point where if you have this curated model in this decentralized context, it becomes pretty tough to sort of it's hard to do that sort of curation with a very decentralized, community and ecosystem, because you can't necessarily, nobody can go and say, look, this is how it's going to be done. These are going to be the chains we're going to have. Nobody has that authority actually in the Cosmos Hub. I certainly don't, and not even people who are, very well, like Ethan or something, or Zucky or Jay Kwan or whatever, people who founded it don't even have that authority. So I think we kind of realized that we need to go, since it is such a decentralized community and ecosystem, we need to go for more free market model and kind of let things evolve, versus having a model that depends on kind of curation. So I think that's why we shifted strategies. Another thing I will say, though, is there's another improvement coming in the new version of ICS, which is something I wrote about on the forum, but is not really, I don't think a lot of people have paid attention to it, but I think it is pretty important, which is that validators will be able to set their own commission rates for each consumer chain. So right now, how it is the validators charge a commission. A lot of them charge 5%. That commission applies to their Atom validation, and then also applies to any rewards that come from the consumer chains. And so validators generally don't want to change that because they don't want to raise their commission, makes them less competitive. With the new version of ICS, they're going to be able to say per consumer chain, they're going to be able to say, hey, this consumer chain is a little expensive to run. I'm going to be charging 20% on this one. And so it's going to let them really dial it in a lot more and kind of do better for, being able to get the economics exactly right. So that'll help as well. But I mean, that's sort of the reason we've shifted it.
Okay. No, that makes sense. I mean, taking a step back and looking at, I think, what has really been a prevailing advantage of Cosmos, maybe over, I like sort of a tangent here, but I like to compare Cosmos and Polkadot as the cathedral and the bazaar, where Cosmos always took this very market-based approach, and Polkadot had a more central decision-making approach. And I think that has been very important to the success of Cosmos and the flourishing of ideas in Cosmos. Now that makes things very messy, and that's normal, and like governance is messy and decision making is messy, but in the end I think you get something that's much stronger, much more resilient, much better. And for the long term, this idea of having a more market based approach for interchain security feels more in line with the Cosmos vision. But I think that because I wonder if the reason for wanting to, at first at least, have a more curated approach wasn't a sort of reaction to the to the drama and sort of all of the messiness within Cosmos, and at least for the hub, wanted to sort of curate and narrow down the project so that we wouldn't end up in this very disorganized, messy, dramatic situation. But I don't know. I mean, in the end, I think it's better, and probably in the long term will end up being better for the hub to have a market-based approach to governance, or sorry, to interchain security.
So, yeah. Somebody who asked I don't know if we want to cover this now, but somebody asked about the subset problem on Twitter.
Let's do it. Let's talk about the subset problem. Let's go through it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. We're gonna get really technical here. A lot of interchain security's design was driven off of that, and so that's So I'll get into it. So basically, the subset problem was something that I sort of noticed a long time ago when we were first working on interchain security, and basically I was thinking, because we actually originally were going to have a B opt-in, like what we're about to release was supposed to be the original version, or maybe the replicated security was just supposed to be a prototype or something where it's the whole validator set. But I realized at some point, hey, what happens if you have 10 small validators, let's just say really small ones at the bottom of the set? They might have, they might have like 0.1% each, right? And they total up to only 1% of the power. And they're opted in on a consumer chain. And then you have a validator with 2% of the power opt-in. They're from, higher up, maybe in the middle of the set, around 2%. I thought it's pretty high actually, but so a larger validator that comes in immediately. That large validator has 2/3 of the power on the chain, and the validators on any chain, any Cosmos chain, or any blockchain at all, any proof of stake chain at least, if you have 2/3 of the power, you control the chain. So I was like, man, what about that? What do we do there? And the thing is, what some of the original earlier, some of the suggestions, actually stuff we're putting into play now though, actually, but like some of the suggestions were like, from people I was working with, were like, well, let's just make it so that you limit the power, so no validator can have more than 25% on a consumer chain, or different things like that. Or you can't have them join too quickly. If they join, their power ramps up over time, so it doesn't immediately take over, stuff like that. And so that stuff I think practically does probably work pretty well. But it's also kind of the kind of thing where it's always possible to kind of for validators to break up their stake. So for one large validator to appear as several small ones. You can see the extreme example of this in Ethereum, where they decided to not have things be centralized. They wanted to limit it, so you can only have 32 ETH staked. So like every validator needs to be very, very small, and they thought it was going to result in like everybody running validators in their bedroom or whatever. What really happened was that everybody used liquid staking services, who each run thousands and thousands and thousands of separate validators on Ethereum. And so that is so that kind of makes it so that even if you try to limit the power of validators, you can't really do it because they can always break it up. So anyway, digging deeper into that, that's what I call the subset problem. Is like, well, if you have the subset, then they open themselves up to kind of being taken over. And to put a finer point on that, we've kind of as we've evolved our understanding and stuff. What the understanding, like my understanding of that is actually more that the issue at play there is the fact that there are some things you can slash for and some things you can't slash for. So you can slash for double signing. That's what interchain security slashes for. and a native Cosmos, regular proof of stake chain, independent standalone proof of stake chain also slashes for double signing. You'll soon be able to slash for, or at least completely prohibit, like what I call incorrect execution, which is where you like make money out of thin air or something like that, but just break the rules of the protocol completely. That will be something with ZK proofs and fraud proofs that can be prevented. But then there's still stuff like, for instance, it's very hard to slash for like downtime, actually, for liveness. The downtime slashing we have is actually more of just to keep honest people honest. It's not, if you really want to stop a chain, you can do it without being slashed. And there's actually doesn't seem to be any cryptographic way to even prove it to a protocol. So basically, the issue at play is that if you are is that standalone chains are kept secure a lot through basically through economic alignment. So if you're an osmosis validator, even if you could attack osmosis and not be slashed for it by the protocol, you would still lose a bunch of money if you were successful, because you got a bunch of tokens staked. So it's almost like you're being slashed by the market, right? And so with restaking, you'll lose that because it's a different token being staked now. There's a lot of other benefits that come with it, of course, but it's not the same exact token, right? And then also the other thing is if you have a replicated security where you have the entire validator set validating every consumer chain, if they do something wrong in that consumer chain, it still is like they're still going to be slashed by the market, So if like the entire validator set of the Cosmos Hub, screws up Neutron and makes money out of thin air on Neutron, like the Atom is going to tank, and those validators are going to lose a lot of money because they're economically aligned with Atom. Whereas if you have like one validator that's running one consumer chain do something bad, it's not as clear of a boundary. And so in the past year and a half or so, one thing that's happened is that a lot of other restaking protocols have come out, and they've largely ignored this. And so to stay competitive, I mean, we kind of have to give the people what they want, and we have to make it up to consumer chains to decide what they want their guarantees to be, and allow them to launch in the way that they want, without necessarily having everything be like where we know it's like the maximum security. The other thing that we're going to be bringing in with partial set security is fraud votes. So this is going to be something that consumer chains can choose to activate, and that basically makes it so that validators validating on one of these chains can be slashed by a governance proposal. And so that is able to slash things where it's hard to slash in protocol. So stuff like liveness attacks or incorrect execution will be slashable by a vote, which is kind of replicates the mechanism of being slashed by the market in a standalone chain where you're just economically aligned, except for the fact that now you don't have to have every validator having some of that token. You can leave it up to governance to slash validators. So I think it's still an ongoing area of research, this kind of stuff, and it's an issue that faces pretty much all restaking. It's something I'm continuing to research and write about, and also talk with people at Eigenlayer and stuff about, and Babylon, and we're all figuring it out together. But I think the fraud votes are a pretty good way to remedy it. And then also just partial set security is kind of about opening it up and giving consumer chains the choice to launch how they want and make the security choices that they want. That's kind of the philosophy.
Okay, I'm beginning to get a picture of what this looks like, and I think you mentioned earlier that validators who are not in the active set of the hub are also going to be able to participate in partial set security. That's right?
Yeah, not in the first version. So the code we're doing now, it is only in the active set. That's a lot easier.
Okay.
There's a lot of details around bonding and unbonding, but that's definitely something we should be able to put in with some effort, depending how we prioritize it.
Okay. Yeah. So then if you're an app chain, I'm just trying to sort of like understand the calculus here. Like if you're a new app chain, let's say like DYDX or some other, big vision chain, a frontier chain, as we put it earlier, that wants to build a Cosmos SDK chain and like be secured by validators. Like there's now like two ways that they can do that. They can go out and do a validator roadshow, like call up all their VCs and all their VCs friends and all the validators in the space and like run an incentivized testnet and sort of do that work themselves to get validators to come on board. Or they can go to the Cosmos Hub, which presumably now that there's partial set security and that there is this marketplace, like validators will be incentivized to also participate in Cosmos Hub staking, even if they're not in the active set, because they're going to have access to like a pipeline of chains that are choosing to be staked there. So So basically, the old way to do it, which is just to do this validator roadshow and try to incentivize people to come on your chain, doesn't really make sense anymore if the Cosmos Hub is able to attract, the majority of validators in the space, because it'll be like sort of this direct pipeline, essentially, this marketplace that we talked about earlier, where you have this direct pipeline to validators and a sort of streamlined way to onboard those validators onto your chain. Like, is that right, or is there still an argument for doing it kind of the old way?
I think that there's always going to be people who want to take the Cosmos technology and customize it to a huge extent and build their own validator sets, and that's not something I think there's always going to be something people want to do. But I think that for the majority of chains, for smaller projects, leaner teams, I think that will become very big, someday. I think that there's a lot of utility in having a place to launch, and like a way to do it, basically, like just like the best way to launch. I remember when I was, it was like maybe 2018 or 19. I wasn't really involved in Cosmos to a big extent, but I went to a Cosmos hackathon and I built a hackathon project. And then it was almost a little bit like anticlimactic, because like you go to an Ethereum hackathon and, they're like, oh yeah, now just hit the deploy button and now it's live on Ethereum, and it's like pretty exciting. With Cosmos, it's like, they were like, I think it was like, Jay Kwan and like Ethan there and stuff. And they're like, okay, guys, now you can just, run this one validator on your own computer and you can see how your chain works. But yeah, of course, if you want to have a real chain, you have to find these other validators. And I was like, where, it's just running on my computer now. When's it going to go live,
It is live.
So I think that's something
it's live on your computer.
Yeah, it's live on one computer, yeah. So I think that's something that's been a little bit of a puzzle for projects, especially projects coming from other ecosystems, for a long time with Cosmos is like what now? And so with Interchain Security, what we want to do is give these projects like the best way to launch their Cosmos chain. So like, sure, you go out, you find your own validators. That might be a good fit for some very large, prominent projects. But for most projects, it's going to be easiest to just permissionlessly put a transaction on the hub. Validators start coming in, the chain starts running. That's kind of what we're going for, to make the best place to launch a chain.
No, that's cool. And I think I want to now take a little bit of a zoom out a little bit, because I read in one of your posts on the Hub forum about Babylon, you said something, and I'm paraphrasing here, to the effect of that you hope that the Hub will become an aggregator of security. And that this really kind of stuck out at me as like a new concept that I hadn't heard before. Now, of course, like this was in the context of talking about bringing Bitcoin security to the Hub. Can you expand on what's the kind of end game here in terms of bringing other sources of security to the Hub and augmenting the existing validator set?
Yeah, I think so. We don't want to augment the Well, yes, I guess it's augmenting the validator set. We don't want to bring more validators. Obviously, more validators can join the hub anytime, but it's like,
right. I mean, like augmenting the security.
Validator set.
Yeah.
Yeah, augmenting the security. Yeah. So like I was saying, like the goal here, the North Star, is to provide the best place, or the best way to launch a chain, right? And so everything else is in service of that. And, chains don't necessarily care about like what's the most security or whatever. They certainly do care about it to some extent, but it's like a lot of times it's like, how do we get launched? How do we get launched with enough security? And then also there's also, alignment. So sometimes like there's a lot of people building what are effectively, Cosmos chains, but they're calling them Bitcoin L2s because they want to be aligned with Bitcoin and do things for the Bitcoin community. So I think in service of that goal of like it being the best way to launch a chain, that means that we don't want to limit it and say it can only be secured by Atom. We want you to be able to launch a chain secured by anything on the Cosmos Hub. So that's what the Babylon partnership is about. Is kind of bringing additional sources of security in, and we're also working on bringing other assets in. It's actually going to be kind of pretty much the same code to bring the Bitcoin security in as it is going to be for any other asset as well. So that's kind of definitely Bitcoin will be first, but we're going to open, we're going to be adding more security sources as quickly as we can. So what's interesting about it, the way it interplays with the validator set is basically the validator who's secured by so people staking on these different platforms. So let's say Atom, so with staking Atom natively on the hub, and then also let's say with staking Bitcoin on Bitcoin, which Babylon allows, a validator's power is going to be made up of the security from everybody who delegates to that validator, no matter where they're delegating from. So if I don't know, let's say what's a good example? Let's say SG1. SG1 has some number of Atom delegations, and they have some number of Bitcoin delegations. They're going to take that power and that security to any consumer chain that they choose to validate on.
What's a Bitcoin with the security, delegation?
Oh, okay. That's just okay. I want to get off on the tangent too much, but we can talk more about Babylon. Basically, Babylon.
Yeah, but it's because I think here it bears sort of unpacking what a Bitcoin delegation is, because I've never heard that term in my life.
So Babylon allows people to basically stake on Bitcoin. So they've come up with some novel cryptography to basically let you lock your Bitcoins up directly on the Bitcoin blockchain and have that power go towards validators on proof of stake chains on the Cosmos Hub. And the Bitcoins also, they get slashed if there's double signing. So it's kind of, they put together the package of delegation and slashing and rewards. So it's basically like you could be delegating Atom on the Cosmos Hub, or you could be delegating Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network. And that those are the the source of security I'm talking about aggregating here, although we want to add other ones. But yeah, just to clear that up.
Okay.
But what I was going to say about the validators, is that validators, who we can do more of a deep dive on that too if you want. But I was just to finish the thought. Validators, let's say SG1's power will come from the Atom delegations and the Bitcoin delegations, and so there's kind of that's where the security aggregation comes in. It's like you're kind of creating almost like this effect where the more that people are trying to stake on like any chain that's running on the Cosmos Hub, the more security also goes towards other chains at the same time too. And so there's this flywheel effect, and that's what I was talking about for security aggregation. So you might have, let's say SG1 is validating on the Cosmos Hub, on Stride, on Neutron, and also on let's say some kind of Bitcoin L2. Bitcoin people from Bitcoin are delegating because they want to earn rewards in that Bitcoin L2 from SG1. SG1's power now is actually going to be increased everywhere it's validating, within the Cosmos Hub system. So that's the security aggregation concept.
Okay, and regarding security, I think it's becoming clear that security is on the way to becoming commoditized. We hosted this event in Denver we called it Convergence, and it was sort of a panel about the convergence of Cosmos and Ethereum. And really, to me, the takeaway there is that what that means is that Ethereum security is becoming commoditized. Application, the Cosmos SDK framework and IBC are going to be leveraging commoditized security to build applications and that interoperate with each other. And that the end game is this swarm of validators that's proving lots of different applications across this massive kind of state machine. How does the hub compete in this commoditized security landscape, and how does it differentiate itself from, at least in the short term, with the likes of EigenLayer and Polygon V2 and some of the other restaking projects out there?
Yeah, I think the key is in this landscape is that you don't want to just be a middleman. You don't want to be a middleman between an asset and the thing it's securing, because the middlemen are going to get cut out. And so, you need to be providing value. I think, the real thing, like even with EigenLayer, let's say, the real thing is the Ethereum that's being used to secure that. That's where the value is going, is to people who are actually staking their assets. And anything that's kind of going between, is in the pipeline between the staked asset and then the system is securing, ultimately needs to be providing value. And so the way we want to do that with the Cosmos Hub is by focusing on this thing about where it's the best way to launch a chain. And I think ultimately that's more important, that you bring all these chains together versus kind of offering any one particular kind of security. And like I said, there's the flywheel effects with where the validator set getting more security from other sources makes it even stronger. So that's kind of what we're focusing on is adding value by making things easier for chains versus just saying like, hey, we have this source of security that we're bringing in. And that's definitely a shift too. I mean, I think when we started on Interchain Security, we were in the mindset of just, let's bring Atom's security to other chains. But as it's becoming more and more commoditized, we're figuring out how to act as a point within that ecosystem where people can, kind of come around this point and create a flywheel effect and aggregate security.
So maybe just taking the other side here, I want to talk a little bit about Ethos. Now, of course, Ethos is not live yet. It's still sort of in stealth. There's been some information about like what Ethos is building, and Ethos is this eigenlayer EVS that will enable Cosmos SDK chains to leverage Ethereum security. And I think like Ethos positions itself, or at least not explicitly but implicitly, as a competitor to the hub, where applications can leverage all of the restaked ETH in eigenlayer for security. If you're an app chain, like, all right, you have different options for securing your chain. You might build your own validator set, but if that's out of bounds, like sort of out of reach for you, you might go to Cosmos. You might say, hey, like, I want to be aligned with Ethereum because that's where there is the most security, and that's where there's the most economic value in terms of DeFi and liquidity. Maybe barring Bitcoin, like maybe Bitcoin sort of falls outside of that, at least for now. Why would a chain pick the Cosmos Hub over Ethereum and the entire sort of ecosystem, the EVM ecosystem, and all of the rollups and all of the liquidity and applications being built there?
Yeah, I think, well, like I said, I think, launching an app chain, launching a Cosmos chain is the most powerful way to build a blockchain application. It's not necessarily right for every project. I mean, some projects will be better on a rollup or a smart contract directly on Ethereum. So as far as like, the Cosmos Hub versus anyone else, we're going to be adding an eigenlayer EVS as well. It's actually pretty much the same, at least on the Cosmos side, it's kind of the same thing you need to do to bring Bitcoin security and bring eigenlayer security in. So I think we don't want to just be like a middleman. We don't want to just be like an eigenlayer middleman and just saying, hey, here's how here we're offering you this eigenlayer security. We want to aggregate multiple sources of security. Obviously the Atom, which already is, very, very large source of security, but then also Bitcoin and Ethereum, and kind of let people benefit from a validator set that's secured by all these things, versus just kind of acting as a middleman for one of them. Another thing we want to do is actually, when we do this eigenlayer AVS, you kind of need an AVS. It's an eigenlayer. It's a Ethereum contract on the Ethereum side, and then you need like an oracle to be able to read it to get the security in. When we do that work, we actually even want to open source it, because I think that if a chain just wants Ethereum security, they should just go direct to Ethereum. They should set up their own eigenlayer AVS. So I think just kind of sticking on one source of security and putting ourselves in as a middleman is not what we're really shooting for. We're trying to aggregate a lot of different security and bring it together with a battle-tested validator set, innovative stream of consumer chains, and be the best way to launch a chain. So that's kind of our focus. I can't speak for anybody else, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense. One of the topics on the panel in Denver was alignment. And so we talked a lot about what Ethereum alignment means and what Cosmos alignment means. And the question was like, is there such a thing as Cosmos alignment? I think the prevailing takeaway was that Cosmos alignment is not so much about aligning with an asset as it is maybe in Ethereum, but aligning with a technology and specifically with IBC, right? So like Cosmos alignment means being part of the IBC network. Does that resonate with you, or do you see Cosmos alignment as something different?
No, I think that resonates with me. I think that a lot of stuff around alignment in the crypto ecosystem is kind of BS. And I actually find it refreshing in Cosmos that it's like about like, hey, what can we build? What technologies can we use? A lot of times being aligned with an asset, it means that you want to be like, we want to support that. We certainly want to support that with Cosmos Hub, don't get me wrong. But I think it's like, a lot of times there's a lot of stuff that's done where it's kind of you want to kind of like make people like you based on, what community you choose to align with versus like trying to build the most useful thing. I think in Cosmos it's great that we have a lot of teams that are, just trying to use the technology to build the most useful thing they can without it being like about trying to choose a particular tribe or whatever. And so with the Cosmos Hub, with Interchain Security, we want to always, what we do, we want to facilitate that. We want to build something useful where you can use the security you want, get it from where you want, and kind of have it set up in the way you want versus trying to say, hey, I'm part of this tribe or whatever.
Yeah, I think what we had concluded in the panel was that alignment is a bear market coping mechanism, and that whenever the bull market comes around, like alignment just gets thrown out the window because there's so many opportunities and incentives to put your liquidity towards like things that might not be aligned with your initial thesis. And so I thought that's kind of funny. Anyway, I'll put the link in the show notes for people who are interested in reading the recap of the panel and rewatching the panel, because it's also on YouTube. So yeah, what's the end game here? Like, looking now, the hub's 5 years old, and I wish the hub many more years, and I hope that we're still all holding Atom in 5 years from now. What's the end game for the hub in your view?
Yeah, I think the hub does more, like you said. It was, also, Atom Wars and also, Atomic IBC and roll-up related stuff, which we'll have to cover later, and maybe
we'll have to get you back on.
Things too,
you'll have to come back to talk about that.
Yeah, but I will say, as far as Interchain Security goes, the end game is like I want to create, what's been missing, which is like, hey, I've built this, I've used this powerful technology, I've built this powerful blockchain, but it's only running on my computer. I want to provide people a way where it's just like the best way to launch it. Like, there's other ways to launch it. Sure, you can't put together your own validator set, and that's always something that some people will choose. But I want this to be just kind of the best way if you're just trying to get your project out, get it launched, get it secured by a lot of security, and get moving. So that's kind of what we're shooting for.
Great, Jehan, thanks so much for coming on today. It's been really, really fun chatting, and looking forward to getting you back on to cover all the things that I have here in my rundown that we didn't get to cover.
Yeah, cool. Good talking.
Cheers.